So if they're that good, why don't I own one? That's a really good question. Hello guys, and welcome to this Volkswizard video, which is somewhat overdue, I think, because it features probably one of my favourite Volkswagens of all time, if not the favourite, the Corrado VR6. Now, much like the Capri in the 80s, if you're a Volkswagen fan in the 90s, like I was, this was a car that you always used to promise yourself, and I've been lucky enough to own 3 of them. The second one I prepared for track days but kept looking standard, and that appeared in Volkswagen Driver magazine. The third one was more of a restoration, and that car actually appeared on 5th gear on 2 separate occasions. But since I sold that car, I've not been behind the wheel of one, so it's with big thanks to the generous owner of this one, a guy called Paul Fox, who I've known for a very long time, that I'm able to reacquaint myself with probably one of my favourite cars of all time, and I can take you along for the ride too. So without any further ado, let's have a closer look at the timeless Corrado VR6. Okay, let's start off by talking about the very distinctive colour called Blackberry Metallic. It's a bit different to that on the Golf VR6 Highline, which was called Purple Violet, but it's easily my favourite, and one of my 3 was in this colour, and it's the one I miss the most. The standard colours for the VR6 were red, a solid black and a white, and there are quite a few metallics you could choose as well. The grey looks particularly good too. You've got these 15-inch speedline wheels on the VR6 model, 6.5 times 15 ET45, and they take 205 50 15 tyres. The brakes are pretty small at 280mm, perfectly fine for the road, but a bit undernourished for the track. And worth noting is that you've got 5 wheel bolts, which was quite unusual. The other models, the G60, even the 1.8 16 valve and 2 litre 16 valve, all had 4-bolt wheels. Only the VR6 got this. And this is called the Plus Axle, so it was shared with the Golf GTI that came out, funny enough, at the same time the Corrado VR6 came out in '92. The Corrado always had these very racy mirrors, which compared to the Mark II Golf ones, which were just like flat at the back, they're much more aerodynamic and hinted at the car's top speed, which was quite good for its day, 146 miles per hour. I think that was the same as the Golf V6 4Motion that was a good 6 years later. You got a VR6 badge on the grille and one on the back. On the early cars, these were red, but they soon changed to this silver colour, and that was the same as on the Golf VR6 to have them in silver. The Golf VR6 never had them in red. For the UK market, all the VR6 models got a sunroof. They got the Bee-Sting aerial, which has come from the Mark II Golf GTI 16 valve. Every Corrado, regardless of engine, got the active spoiler, although I have heard stories from about people who've bought them and they don't work, and the dealer says you don't get it as an active spoiler if you haven't bought a VR6, but that's not true. They all get it, and they all are pretty reliable. They come up at about 45 miles per hour. You got an oval exhaust, a standard. This is, well, it looks pretty standard to me, but it's probably not. But the tip does look, I think, roughly right for the model. The ride height's worth talking about, because that really would be laughed out of the showroom on a modern car. I mean, I can get it's probably not much different to the gap you get on a modern SUV. That's my hand in there, pretty much square. But amazingly, it goes round corners really well. It's got a very good balance of ride and handling, much better than, say, the Golf Mark II, and it's much better than the Mark IIIs, which were absolutely terrible, very underdamped. This was obviously set up by someone with a different brief, because it drives like a sports car, which we'll come to in a sec. Let's have a look at under the bonnet, because that is quite important. Then we'll have a look inside it. So when the VR6 model came out, the bonnet was redesigned, and probably some other bits as well to accommodate it. So if you look at an early car, I mean, every Corrado, once the VR6 came out, had this shape bonnets, even if it had a 16 valve. But before the VR6 came out, the bonnets were much squarer, and this looks much more, I don't know, just much more aggressive, while the standard model looks a bit like a Mark II Golf at the front. There we go. Oh, it's a very heavy bonnet, partly because of all this soundproofing, which is often in very bad condition, but this is mint. I think he might have replaced it at some point. The owner's had this car for 12 years, slowly restored it as he's gone along. Now, any experts out there might have already noticed a few extras under this bonnet that are not standard, like that sticker and that relay array over there, and that's because this car has got Diavia air conditioning, which was the one that people fitted. I wouldn't say it was Volkswagen approved, but a dealership in London called Scotts of Sloane Square fitted a lot of them. I suppose if you're in traffic in London in the summer, you want air conditioning, and this amazingly still works. It's really cool. So there we have the engine. So VR6 means V Reihen motor, which is a contradiction in terms really, because it means inline V, but basically a traditional V6 would be too big to fit in the Golf platform. So Volkswagen very, very cleverly engineered a 6-cylinder engine that would fit. Even an inline would be too long, like you get in the BMW. So they made like one that was a 1-cylinder head, but the length of basically a 4-cylinder engine. It's very, very clever, very, very reliable. It's got a lot of character to it as well. Yeah, it's a shame that everything's 2-litre T nowadays when you drive an engine like this, as we'll come to shortly. You've got the spark plug removal tool there, because they're pretty hard to get to down in the depths of the cylinder head because of the way the engine was designed. So the front end on this car was pretty much the same as Mark II Golf. The back end was Passat, which meant it got passive rear wheel steering from some trick rear axle bushes, which gave it better stability than it would otherwise have. Okay, let's have a look inside. We'll start on this side, I think. This car's got the optional leather interior. A lot of cars did, to be honest. Cloth wasn't really that common. It's got basically a Passat style dashboard, which compared to Mark II Golf is slightly more interesting. For a start, you get 3 dials, which is pretty cool. So you get a big rev counter, big speedo, you get coolant gauge there, fuel gauge there, some warning lights down there. The steering wheel is leather, as is the gear knob. That was a VR6 thing. And to me, it always reminds me of the Batman sign, but this was Mark III Golf GTI pre-facelift wheel. It's not a bad wheel. Horn in the middle. Should be a Sony stereo that does look pretty similar to this JVC, but this car hasn't got it. Most of them have gone wrong by now. Now let's talk about Carman then, because it was very unusual that this got onto the car, really, because Carman were just a contractor to Volkswagen. They weren't part of Volkswagen at all, and they had a factory in Osnabrück that did the low volume stuff for Volkswagen. Unfortunately, they went out of business in the noughties, but they've since been bought by VW, and still they do the lower volume stuff. So they do the T-Roc convertible, they do Porsches when Stuttgart don't have the capacity to do them. So yeah, they're still going, but they're just part of they're just called Volkswagen Osnabrück. They also did the Escort convertible, the Mark I Golf convertible, as you probably know by the badges on the side of it, and they did the A4 convertible. So you get the picture. So this car's got electric windows. One annoyance of the Corrado, for some reason, you didn't get it on the Mark II Golf, is that you don't have a wide-angle rear view mirror. So the owner's stuck one on there so we can get a safer view. But yeah, I always find that a bit peculiar. Let's have a look in the back. So bearing in mind, it's quite a small car, there was a pretty good use of space. I mean, I could quite happily, in fact I will, assuming nobody drives down this road, I'll get in the back and show you. But you never see this on Car Wow. Right then, well, I'm not sure whose driving position this is, but okay, it's pretty tight. I don't think many people get in the passenger seat of this car. If I put that back up, which is pretty normal, it's not bad, you know. I'm 6 foot tall, my head is on there, but only just. Yeah, I'd quite happily be in this. It's much better than, say, a 911, and for kids, they'd love it. You get the famous rear centre armrest. I say famous because it does this, and inside there is the first aid kit, which is one of those stupid things that means a lot to buyers if a car's got one, especially if it's got a Volkswagen. Yeah, it's a genuine VW, and probably like many years out of date, and in an emergency you'd probably find yourself still bleeding all over the hard shoulder. Yeah. June 96, so the car, yeah, that's almost as old as the car. But yeah, it's pretty spacious. Well, I think I'm going to save myself the embarrassment of trying to get out of here, and I'll just cut to us going for a drive because I think it's long overdue. Okay guys, here we are behind the Corrado VR6's very distinctive Batman style wheel. I've had a lot of fun in these cars over the years, both on the road and on the track, and therefore it's with a bit of trepidation when I revisit one after such a long time, because they could be you should not meet your heroes type moments. And to be perfectly honest, first impressions were not that positive. Driving it around town on bumpier roads, it does sound a bit rattly, both trim and suspension. And then the clutch really needs to have the pedal pressed all the way down, otherwise you end up grinding gears, which takes a bit of getting used to, but it's fine once you do. Also, the engine doesn't really feel as responsive as I remember it. It's a bit flat unless you work it hard, and that's probably to do with the gears. It's an autobahn car, so they are quite long, but also because in the intervening however many years I've driven a lot of 2-litre turbo cars, which tend to give you what you want when you want it, but one thing they can't do is sound good. So from about 3,500 we get some noise, and then 4,000 it keeps going. The problem with that though is that you end up approaching corners quite fast, and you hope the massive gap in the wheel arch isn't representative of the car's handling, because if it is, it's going to come to quite a sudden end. But luckily, even though it rolls quite a bit, once it's taken its attitude, it's quite neutral. So you can enjoy that noise, even drop a gear. And have a hell of a lot of fun. A hell of a lot of fun. This is still a very fast car. Bear in mind, it's 1992, 0 to 60, 6.9, that's not bad. That's sort of Mark 5 Golf GTI, which was 13 years later and a bit of a performance benchmark, admittedly at a lower relative cost. So yeah, it's still a quick car. It doesn't feel particularly old once you take the rattles out and get used to the clutch. The seating position's really good, it's really nice and low. The gear shift's quite long compared to modern cars, but it's pretty precise. Third to second, which is always the tricky one, is perfectly fine. Brakes, they're okay. I think they're fine for the road. Track days you need to upgrade, but it's really too precious to track day now. It really is a weekend car, primarily because it's hard to get parts. You have a little wing skirmish in a supermarket car park, I don't know where you're going to get one from. I don't think anybody makes them anymore. No one's breaking them for second-hand parts because they're just worth so much. So what do you do? So really, it's a weekend car, but it's a bloody brilliant weekend classic. Doesn't lose any money, not particularly expensive to run. There's a specialist called Stealth Racing in Southam in Warwickshire, about 8 miles away, that are brilliant. There are other specialists as well. They're not a particularly complicated car that you need to go to a specialist to service. It's just a parts issue really. So yeah, so if they're that good, why don't I own one? That's a really good question. Yeah, one that I'm going to ask myself as I drive home now. Anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed this Volks Wizard video. If you have, you know what to do. Give it a thumbs up. Please do comment, please share it amongst other enthusiasts who may enjoy it, and please, and this is really, really important, please do subscribe, because a lot of views are from non-subscribers, and that really doesn't make this channel sustainable in the long term, so please do subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one soon. In the meantime though, I'm going to do a bit more of this while I can, because who knows when I'm going to be able to do it ever again.